Hook 0 to 15s. Somebody in your office is making $30,000 more than you. Same job. Same title. Maybe less experience. And if you walked into your HR department today and asked them to explain why, they couldn't. Not because they're hiding it, because they genuinely don't know. Tension, 15 to 60s. Pay transparency laws are spreading across the United States. More companies than ever are now legally required to post salary ranges on job listings. And what's happening as a result is deeply uncomfortable. Employees are seeing those ranges for the first time. They're comparing. They're asking questions. And what they're discovering isn't just that there's a gap. It's that nobody can explain the gap. Fortune ran a piece on this recently that should have made national headlines. The finding was staggering in its simplicity. Most companies cannot articulate why they pay their employees what they pay them. Not won't, can't. So if no one designed your salary, what created it? Body. Let's go back to the beginning. When most people get a job offer, there's a number. Maybe there was a negotiation. Maybe there wasn't. You accepted, you signed, and life moved forward. What you probably didn't think about is this. That number wasn't calculated. It was estimated. It was guessed. It was based on what the last person in that seat made, adjusted slightly for inflation, maybe nudged up if you pushed back hard enough in the offer call. That's it. There is no formula. There is no rubric. In most organizations, there is no one in the building who sat down with a spreadsheet and logically derived what your labor is worth. And here's the thing that will sit with you for a while after this video. That number you accepted, it compounds. Every raise you get is a percentage of that original guess. Every future job offer uses your current salary as a reference point. Every negotiation you ever have starts from that anchor. One arbitrary number, set at the beginning, echoing through your entire career. This is what behavioral economists call the anchoring effect, and it is one of the most powerful and underappreciated forces shaping your financial life. Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in economics, spent decades documenting how initial numbers warp our perception of value. You see a jacket marked down from $400 to $200, and it feels like a deal, even if $200 is objectively too much. The anchor reframes everything. Your starting salary is that anchor. And most of the time, it was set by someone who was just trying to fill a seat before the quarter ended. But wait, it gets worse. Let's talk about what pay transparency is actually revealing. When companies post salary bands, the ranges are often absurdly wide. $60,000 to $120,000 for the same role. That's not a salary range. That's a confession. It's an admission that the company itself doesn't know what the work is worth. It knows a floor it won't go below, and a ceiling it hopes it never has to reach, and everything in between is negotiation theater. And who wins negotiation theater? Not the people who need the money most, not the people who are most qualified. The people who win are the ones who were taught that salary is something you fight for, not something you receive. Research from Carnegie Mellon found that men are 4 times more likely to negotiate a first salary than women. And the people who do negotiate typically earn anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 more per year. Compounded over a 40-year career, that's potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not because they worked harder, because they asked. So the system doesn't reward performance. It rewards confidence, access to information, and cultural permission to demand more. Now, here's the question nobody is asking out loud yet. If companies can't explain their pay decisions, does that mean those decisions were ever fair to begin with? There's a concept in organizational psychology called pay equity, and it sounds simple. Equal pay for equal work. But implementing it requires something most companies have never done. It requires them to actually compare. Role to role, level to level, outcome to outcome. And when they do that exercise, the numbers often don't hold up. A 2025 pay scale study found that even in companies with formal pay structures, unexplained pay gaps persist at almost every level. The gaps correlate with race, with gender, with whether or not you went to a university the hiring manager recognized, with whether you reminded someone of themselves in an interview. These aren't intentional acts of discrimination in most cases. They're accumulated bias baked into thousands of small, undocumented decisions made over years by people who thought they were being fair. The road to pay inequity is paved with, "I had a good feeling about this candidate." So what happens now that the curtain is being pulled back? Here's what's fascinating from a psychology standpoint. Pay transparency doesn't just expose gaps. It changes how people feel about their work, sometimes in ways that are counterintuitive. A study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that when employees learn a colleague earns more, their job satisfaction drops even if their own pay hasn't changed. The number didn't change. The work didn't change. The feeling did. Completely. This is relative deprivation theory. We don't experience our salary in a vacuum. We experience it in comparison. And once you know what someone else makes, you can never unknow it. The reference point shifts. The anchor moves. This is why companies fought pay transparency for decades. Not necessarily because they had something to hide, although some did, but because they understood, consciously or not, that the feeling of fairness is more fragile than actual fairness. Keep people in the dark, and they'll fill the gap with hope. Turn on the lights, and they'll see exactly where they stand. Climax. Here is the central thing this all points to. Your salary is not a reflection of your value. It never was. It is a reflection of the information you had when you accepted the job, the negotiating culture you were raised in, the implicit biases of whoever made the offer, and the arbitrary anchor set by whoever held the role before you. That is a deeply uncomfortable thing to sit with, because we've been told the opposite our entire lives. Work hard. Get good at something. The money will follow, but the money doesn't follow performance. The money follows documentation, leverage, and proximity to people who set the numbers. And now that pay transparency is ripping the curtain away, companies are being forced into a choice they never prepared for. Either explain the logic or admit there isn't any. Most of them are choosing a third option. Wide ranges, vague language, HR responses that say compensation is determined by a variety of factors, which is true, and also means almost nothing. Ending. So where does this leave you? Honestly, in a strange kind of power. Because the moment you understand that your salary was never a scientific determination of your worth, you stop waiting to be discovered. You stop assuming that someone in leadership is tracking your contributions and will reward you at the appropriate time. They're not. Not because they're villains, because they're busy and underprepared and working from the same inherited system of guesses that set your anchor in the first place. The people who will win in the pay transparency era aren't the ones who finally feel validated by the data. They're the ones who use the data. They're the ones who walk into the room and say, "I can see the range. I know what this role is worth, and I know what I bring to it. Let's talk." Your salary was never inevitable. It was negotiable from the start. And somewhere right now, someone with your same job title just got $30,000 more because they understood that.